How are you doing? I have not seen you all in a while. My hiatus went on for a bit. Just now, let me adjust the. Yeah, this is better. This is better. Hi, good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. How are you doing? Let me shout out some people. Hi, Carol Campbell. Happy New Year to you too. Hi, Celestine. Thank you very much. How you doing? Sule, you reach for the box? I here to give you the box, honey. That's why I'm here. Hi, Storm. I miss you too. Oh, there you go, Storm. Hi, I missed you too, honey. Hi, John Edwards. Good evening. Hi, Marilyn. Marilyn, you missed me. I missed you too, my darling. So that's why I'm back. That's why I'm here. Hi, Billy Bob. How you doing? Good evening. Billy just be calling me auntie like, he's my nephew. Billy's not my nephew, but yes, Billy. Hi. Hi, Deepa. Hey, Lauren, how you doing? Hello. Hi, Belladonna. Hi, Ann McCarthy. Hi, Patricia. Y'all, good evening. Nice to have you all here. Thank you so much for joining me. And I know precisely why you all are here. You all are here because of the Stanley John report. You all are also here because you want to spend some time with me. And I am very grateful that you continue to want to spend some time with me. When I started doing this in 2020, nobody would have get me to believe that 2022, I nearly say 2021, yes, 2022, I would still be here, still preparing to do these lives, still doing these shows with you all. So, we give thanks for that. So, Happy New Year to everyone. And I hope that 2022 is going to be a year filled with possibilities for everybody. Lots of alternatives, lots of choices, lots of possibilities, loads of possibilities. Thank you very much, Janelle. I'm liking the hair too. Hi, Trisha. Hi, Alan. Hi, Anna Sadino. Hi, Eva Smith. Hi, Adana. Good. So let me try and get into this. I kicked the thing off with Denise Belfont song. All I hear the new version of it with Shen Sia and Megan Thee Stallion. That is nowhere near as hot as the version that Denise did. And you know what? I feel like Denise Belfont is one of our unsung heroes. Whether you are into carnival or you're not into carnival, Denise was a performer that, is rather a performer that is bring it. So I have to say that I prefer her version way more than the Shensia Megan Thee Stallion version. But that's me. Why is this headphone giving me a high pitched noise in my ears? I don't think all are hearing it, but I was hearing a high pitched sound in my ears. Right. You all are here for the Stanley John report. So let me start it like this. Last year, I would have done the Scott drug report here with you all. We looked at parts of the Scott drug report. And why did we look at parts of the Scott drug report? Because I wanted to show you all the parallel between Griffith and Randolph Burroughs. I wanted you all to see that Randolph Burroughs came on the scene as a commissioner of police, very similar to how Gary Griffith came onto the scene. Very kind of bravado, a kind of macho-ness, a kind of showmanship, right? Plenty swagger and saga boy behavior and gun talk and wildness left, right, and center. And then his career ended in ignominy. It ended in a way in which there were all kinds of negative things surrounding his name. And a whole Scott drug report was done. A whole report was done by the then chair of the Police Service Commission. And the report found that Burroughs then was part and parcel of the drug trade and the drug racket that was taking place in Trinidad and Tobago at that point in time. Of course, the trade didn't stop. The trade just got more complex, more complicated, and more lucrative. Now, here we are, And that drug report would have been like around 1984, somewhere thereabouts, 1983, 1984. Now here we are in 2022 with a report that would have been done in 2021, and that report centers around yet another commissioner of police who was well known for shooting off his mouth. I don't know that, we don't have any evidence of him having shot off his gun as a police officer, but he certainly shot off his mouth a lot as a commissioner of police. And all of these allegations of corruption and a firearms user's license racket. So, now, thank you very much, Daryl. That is why I used to be calling the man Sloppy Toppy, and people used to be getting very annoyed at me. I warned you all in 2018. I warned you all. I told you all. Not a good candidate for commissioner of police. I feel like Kamla Prasad-Bissessa right about now. Vindicated. Anyhow, let me get into the report. Let me jump into it. Oh my goodness. So I want to start towards the end. By the way, I don't have the full thing. Remember the earthquake that took place a couple nights ago? Right. That earthquake took place. I flew outside to make sure that my house did not cave in on me, because I'm always very stressed about earthquakes. And by the time I got back inside, the earthquake had produced this for me, some pages of it. So when I saw this story this weekend in the Express, I was only too happy, because it meant that it was out and about and around, and so I could talk about it comfortably without people getting too annoyed at me speaking about this document. I will, of course, still protect some of the persons who gave information in the report until the report is made public by the Police Service Commissioner, whoever is going to be making it public, because really and truly, this report should be in the public domain. The whole report. Not the version that I have, which is not the entire thing, and there are certain pages that might be missing, and a full, clean version of the report should be, when I say clean, like total, nothing missing, nothing edited out or anything like that. So the full report ought to be in the public domain, and you all should ask for it. You all should demand it. People who call themselves civil society leaders, people who call themselves thought makers in this space, all of the leading newspapers that is be quick to jump down people's throat for all kinds of things, you all should take a stand and indicate that this report should be made public. It should be out in the public domain. Shouldn't be a situation where only a handful of persons have been able to see it and see some of the contents, because this is something that impacts on the entire country. When you see the names of some of these persons who would have been speaking directly to the Commissioner of Police, or sending correspondence directly to the Commissioner of Police, or sending correspondence to the Commissioner of Police via his agent to be able to have access to FULs, you realize that there's a reason the business class came out in such strong support of keeping Gary Griffith as Commissioner of Police. So Gary, one of the things that this report firmed up for me was that I wasn't wrong when I said that you were the Commissioner of Police for the business class. This report made it very clear to me. Absolutely clear. And so now I feel quite comfortable knowing that the business class in Trinidad and Tobago are very comfortable with corruption. They are quite happy to take their money and become involved in white-collar criminal activity to their own benefit and to their own ends. Because the way all your names jumping up in this report and the implications and suggestions that you all abused your power and your influence and your access to people in high places to be able to get your applications fast-tracked tells me that you all are extremely corrupt. So, let me start towards the end. So this is what Justice John would have said. And I'm reading directly from it, right? And the reason I'm reading directly from it is I don't want nobody come afterwards and sent me a hot pre-action protocol letter. So I'm reading the exact words from the report. So precisely what you hear from me this evening comes out of the report. Let me start. Much of the information collated during this investigation was hearsay. The statements made during the interviews were not on oath. However, the transcript of the interview of each officer was signed by the officer, thereby attesting to its accuracy. I have omitted the names of officers and other persons against whom serious allegations have been made. I am satisfied that sufficient information has been gathered during this investigation to support the findings that there exists a high level of corruption surrounding the issuance of FULs. That's the first paragraph from the section captioned Findings, written by Justice Stanley John. On the basis of all the transcripts obtained, the interviews conducted, the documentary evidence made available to me, and the unexplained role of Ms. Vindra Dukey, I find that requests for varying sums of money have been made of applicants by police officers attached to the firearms permit section and senior officers in some divisions to assist in the issuance of firearms users' license. There has been an absence of certificates of character and in some instances, inaccurate information recorded on such certificates. There has been a failure in at least 2 cases to ensure that the applicants were at least 25 years of age. So people who were underage got FULs. People applied for FULs and did not provide their certificates of character. And so some persons were actually issued their FULs, right? There was an absence in at least 1 case of a certificate of character. In many instances, there was non-compliance with the requirements of Standing Order 40 of the Firearms and Ammunition Act. There exists a practice of certain firearms dealers having access to the non-public areas of the firearms permit section and a particular firearms dealer having access to the vault. So according to the Firearms Act in this country, dealers and private citizens are not supposed to get into the firearms unit and the firearms permit section and get in to any parts there. And throughout this report, officers are saying that dealers used to be regularly in the firearms unit and getting into the vault on a regular basis, taking out files from the vault on a regular basis. But let me continue. Persons convicted of criminal charges, others with criminal charges pending, and even named persons involved in questionable activities have been issued provisional licenses. I remember Gary Griffith having a whole press conference when he was Commissioner of Police saying that nobody that had ever been involved in criminal activity had been issued a firearms, an FUL. Maybe it's because it was a provisional license, but let me repeat that and continue. So according to Justice Stanley John, and I quote, persons convicted of criminal charges, others with criminal charges pending, and even named persons involved in questionable activities have been issued provisional licenses. In one case, an FUL was granted, and in another, the provisions of the Act were not complied with in relation to the grant of a dealership license. An applicant with initials DD who was charged for trafficking in a very significant quantity of cocaine was issued a provisional permit. I will repeat that. An applicant with the initials DD who was charged for trafficking in a very significant quantity of cocaine was issued a provisional permit. It has been confirmed to me both by this ASP and a former captain of the Trinidad Rifle Association that 5.56 millimeter and 7.62 millimeter cartridges are competition grade ammunition. Such ammunition is imported by the association and purchased by sporting enthusiasts at the range. No one is allowed to leave the range with this type of ammunition. Accordingly, I find that the approval to give at least 2 individuals to the permission to purchase such ammunition is highly irregular. So people who not practicing on a sporting range being given the opportunity, given the option to buy ammunition that they're not supposed to be using anywhere else but on a sporting range. And I continue. My investigation leaves me with the firm view of the existence within the TTPS of a highly dysfunctional system for processing applications for FULs and other related licenses and permits. The system is replete with opportunities for illegal, irregular, and other corrupt practices. Clearly, the advantage taken of these opportunities have been widespread. Indeed, the then commissioner has mentioned that he was aware of the significance of this problem by way of several reports made to him. His efforts to address it has clearly been woefully unsuccessful. His own explanation of his involvement in the process, in my opinion, as earlier mentioned in this report, was in breach of the law as set out in Section 16 of the Firearms Act. So I'm stopping there, which is the findings at the end. And let me go forward. I want to go to the start and start giving you some of what was said in the report by persons. So if you're hearing what I just said, Justice Stanley John found that Griffith was in breach of the Firearms Act. Explain to me how Griffith had no bracelets on his hands right now. If you were in breach of a law, that means that something criminal happened. So why have you not been held for questioning? How is it a situation that Gary could be running off his mouth on Facebook every so often, cluttering up WhatsApp with these long 10,000 word theses ever so often, but he has not yet been asked to come in for further questioning with respect to the breach of the Firearms Act? Can anybody explain that to me? So let me get into this. So persons were invited to be interviewed and they accepted the invitations. The only exceptions to being interviewed were Mr. Christian Chandler and Ms. Vindra Dookie. And Ms. Vindra Dookie's name features throughout this report. So let me give you some excerpts from some of the interviews. So I'm going to call everybody police constable, right? And I'm calling everybody police constable and by their first name, so that way me necessarily compromise people, because like I said, this report is not out in the public domain. So Police Constable Mark said that he served in the firearms permit section, and he relates an incident where a member of the defense force applied for an FUL. The applicant attended the section to inquire into the status of the application and spoke to a customer service rep attached to the unit, who informed the applicant that the FUL was being processed. PC Mark said that he subsequently received a telephone call from the applicant who told him that an officer in the section, and the name was given, suggested that an application for an FUEC be made on his FUL application, and then the officer requested $30,000 to be able to do those things. Not PC Mark, but another person, right? On another occasion, PC Mark says he received a call from a named applicant who told him that an officer in the same section that he's working in, which is the firearms permit section, requested $35,000 to assist in obtaining a firearm. So these testimonies here, these statements begin to give you a sense of the kind of money people were requesting for the processing of firearms permits, right? So PC Mark, right, Police Constable Mark, raised the matter with the named officer, and the officer became extremely abusive and used expletives to him in the presence of the 1st Division officer, who remained silent. Let me go on with the rest of this. On yet another occasion, PC Mark said he was approached by an inspector of police who told him that he could cause him to make $20,000 per week in relation to the issuance of firearms if he was interested. And this conversation, he says, took place in the presence of a 3rd person whose name was given. So again, you are seeing testimony that indicates to you the kind of money that would have been passing for the processing of these permits. PC Mark then explained the process for applications going forward to the commissioner. He said after the files were processed and returned to the section from the division, they were placed in the vault and were later taken out either upon request made by Miss Dookie, Vendra Dookie, a civilian attached to the commissioner's office, or at the behest of the 1st Division officer. So, I want all you, we're slowing it down. So that is Police Constable Mark, who has established a couple things here in his testimony, which is that people applying for the FUL and are being told by officers, we want a 30,000 or we want a 35,000 to process your application. Another officer comes and says to him, if you want, you could make a $20,000 a week with the issuance of firearms. This is testimony from a police constable to Justice Stanley John. And he also indicates that in the firearms permit section, when people files reach back from the divisions, Vendra Dookie, a secretary, somebody Gary would have hired as a secretary inside the police headquarters, was the person who was coming to collect people's files. Right? Good. At some point in time this evening, I'm going to tell you all something that I was told by an officer off the record, as in I can't call his name, but I can tell you what the officer said to me. Right? So then there is another person now, Sergeant David. So Sergeant David worked in the section from November 2018 to April 2021. And when he was transferred to the firearms permit section, he was tasked with transforming the section into having some sort of organizational structure. One of the things that you will gather as I go along with the report is that there is a lot of disarray, disorganization, lack of process with this whole FUL process and application, and none of it is digitized. None of it is digitized. And because none of it is digitized, you can't follow when it reached this point to when it get to that point to when it get to the other point. So there is no technology being used here at all. Files coming in hard copy, files resting down wherever they're resting down, and the files and them only moving when the files have been called for. That's what's going on here. Right. So Sergeant David is brought in and he's supposed to bring order to the unit. He formed a compliance unit and, let me quote directly now, he said that he never received any reports of impropriety by members of the section. However, he acknowledged that he had heard that some officers within and outside the section were soliciting money from persons to assist in the processing of firearm licenses. He said that some reports were investigated and if found to be credible, the officers involved were transferred from the section. He admitted that the system with respect to files was very inefficient and the backlog created an environment for corruption. He was bombarded with requests concerning applications from various sections of society, including police officers, politicians, and business associations. Let me repeat that. Sergeant David says that he was bombarded with requests concerning applications from various sections of society, including police officers, politicians, and business associations. He said that some of the information he received concerning officers in the section involved in corrupt practices came from the commissioner himself. The commissioner told him that he heard certain things and received reports about officers, and he, Sergeant David, would follow up and inquire into those reports and allegations. This part here. Right. So while firearms dealers made applications on behalf of persons, Officer David agreed that there was no provision in the Act that allowed for dealers to make applications. So I want all you to understand something. So let me pause here for a second. The Firearms Act does not allow people who are dealers to make applications for people. There's no provision in the law for that. However, many of these firearms dealers, and many of them became dealers when Griffith became Commissioner of Police. Like some of the dealers that you're hearing a lot about in the report are people who were given dealership licenses when Griffith became Commissioner of Police. Two of them named in the report would be Mark Hernandez, and Mark Hernandez then transferred the dealership from his name to his wife's name, and then Adrian Chandler, who I believe is the son of Christian Chandler. So Adrian Chandler was also a firearms dealer, and he became a dealer during Griffith's tenure as Commissioner of Police. You of course have other persons who have been firearms dealers for decades, and their names pop up in this as well as people who are making applications on behalf of their clients. And it appears as if they are now giving like a full service package deal, which also couples with the processing fee, right? Right. So we're still with Sergeant David here. Sergeant David says that the unit accepted applications from clients of firearm dealers based on instructions from the Commissioner of Police, right? So the Commissioner of Police, even though there's no provision in the Firearms Act saying that dealers could make applications, the Commissioner of Police gave instructions that the firearms unit could accept applications in that way. He also stated, so this is Sergeant David saying, that a courier who worked with a named firearms dealer would bring applications to the section on behalf of persons applying for FULs. So this was a situation where people who are applying for their FULs, they're not actively going into the police station and applying for anything. They are going to the dealers. And they're going to the dealers and they're paying their fee, their overall fee for everything. The processing fee and whatever else, right? Whatever else. So the cost of the gun, and a range of other fees. And then the dealers would come and drop off the application forms at the TTPS with their names written on the initials. Their initials would be written on the files. So not the names of the persons who are applying, right? So let me slow this down. So let me use Mark Hernandez's name. So let me say Mark Hernandez was still the firearms dealer, or Mark's wife was still the firearms dealer, and I want to get a gun. I would go to her and I would pay her a sum of money. Now, in Trinidad and Tobago, to the best of my knowledge, is about $150 or something like that. So for the processing fee for your FUL, right? But you're going to these persons and you are paying a far more significant sum than that. to be able to get your FUL. And then they will drop in your application form, your entire application package, because it's not just a form. It's your application form, your certificate of good character. If you have a spouse, permission from your spouse for you to have an FUL, all of those things would be dropped off, would be delivered by them in a file, and their initial will go on to the file. So I want you all to remember two things thus far. Remember everything else that I'm reading out here. Listen to everything else that I'm reading out here. But I have to come back to you to discuss two things: Vindra Dookie and initials on a file. And that's all tied into what I would have been told as the process for this whole racket. So we're coming back to that, right? So when files, let me continue with the report. When files were approved by the commissioner and before they were returned to the section, they went to admin, where the information was entered into a database. This database was managed by Ms. Vindra Dookie, a secretary attached to the office of the commissioner. I must remind you all that Vindra Dookie is a civilian. Vindra Dookie does not work in the firearms section. That's not where she's assigned to. She's a secretary in the office of the commissioner of police. She's a civilian working as a secretary in the office of the commissioner of police. And yet somehow Vindra Dookie's job seems to be to take note and take record of all of the FUL processing files that come in to the firearms section. I want all you to pick sense from nonsense. So let me repeat this paragraph. When files were approved by the commissioner and before they were returned to the section, they went to admin, where the information was entered into a database. This database was managed by Ms. Vindra Dookie, a secretary who is attached to the office of the commissioner. Sergeant David said he did not know the purpose behind the database. Let me repeat that. This database was managed by Ms. Vindra Dookie, a secretary attached to the office of the commissioner. Sergeant David said he did not know the purpose behind the database. So we have no proper database for the applications on them when they come in through the permit section, right? That's not digitized at all. But on the other end of it, once the commissioner has approved those files, so the files that get approved, that enters into a database. Why all you think the files that get approved being noted down in a database? Why is there a need for the commissioner of police to keep track of the files that he has approved? Why is it necessary for him to keep a running record of which FUL files were approved and have his secretary in the TTPS headquarters keep a running log, a running database of those files? How is it that it's not as important for the firearm permit section to have a database of the applications that come in and the applications that have been approved, but the commissioner's secretary is keeping a running file, a running database of which FUL applications have been approved? All you big and all you have sense, you know. Me not to read and spell for all you. So I need to read this bit now. In relation to firearms dealers, Sergeant David said he had the approval of the commissioner to process applications for FULs brought in by firearms dealers. I want to repeat that because further down in this report, Commissioner Griffith, then Commissioner Griffith, at that point in time he's acting Commissioner Griffith. Acting Commissioner Griffith says he has never given permission for officers to process applications brought in from dealers. So let me repeat this. In relation to firearms dealers, Sergeant David said he had the approval of the commissioner to process applications for FULs brought in by firearms dealers. However, he went on to say, that at a meeting at which former Chief of Defense Staff Rear Admiral Hayden Pritchard and others were in attendance, the commissioner denied that he had ever given him approval for this section to treat with firearm dealers who were acting for their clients. Let me give you all some backstory. There is more than one report about corruption with FULs. This is one report, the Stanley John report. There's another report that was done by Rear Admiral Pritchard and, oh my goodness, I've forgotten the fella's entire name, a gentleman whose first name I believe is Barrington. It might be Barrington Richards. This has last name flown straight out of my head. Those two gentlemen did a report, and my understanding is that the report actually got to both the president and the prime minister of this country, wherein they indicated that they had unearthed a racket within the TTPS associated with FULs. Thereafter, their report, Justice Stanley John, was then commissioned by the Police Service Commission to do an independent report into whether or not there was a racket at the TTPS. Now, thus far in this report, I've been reading and talking about dealers and the firearms permit section, and telling you all that dealers are not supposed to be in the unit. And here you have a man, an officer, who was hired by the TTPS to come in and clean up the section, make it more organized, make the section more compliant, saying that he was given approval by the Commissioner of Police to process applications brought in by the dealers, when the Act does not make provision for that. So you're in breach of the Act. And here you are being given approval by the Commissioner of Police to go ahead and process applications that is in breach of the law. It doesn't comply with the law. And when it is raised in the presence of other persons, he is saying here in this report that the Commissioner of Police then says, no, I never gave permission for that. Let me move on. Okay. So there is an officer, I'm just going to call him PC Brian. There were applications that came from named dealers that were expedited. So this, I'm continuing to read, and this would be evidence from Police Constable Brian. I'm just going to call him Police Constable Brian. There were applications that came from named dealers that were expedited. He said that during his brief tenure at the section, the same firearms permit section, applications for FULs were brought in by firearms dealers on behalf of applicants. Two dealers that stood out in this regard, namely Mr. Taufik Ali and Mr. Hugh Leong Poi. Applications from those two dealers were submitted with all the required documents. And these are two names that tend to jump up in this report regularly. He said he raised some concerns and asked questions of the staff as he had recently assumed duties there. He spoke to Inspector David, who told him that the applicant does not have to personally bring in the application form. So again, you have officers who come into the unit and they both immediately say, but this isn't how this is supposed to work. According to the Act, this isn't how it's supposed to work. But then when they ask questions, they're being told, do it this way. So police officers are understanding that they're not following process. And when they ask questions about why they're not following process, they're being told to breach the law. Delving deeper, so we're going back to the report now. Delving deeper, he learned that an applicant would go to a dealer and the dealer charged what is called a processing fee, in that the dealer assisted in gathering all the necessary documents required for processing the application. By the time the application form was submitted, all the requisite documents accompanied the application. Consequently, Police Constable Brian started to implement measures of his own, whereby he looked at the volume of applications coming in, identified the particular dealer as the case may be, and he started to look more closely at the trends. One of the things that stood out was that some of the applications via these two dealers were accompanied by a statement from the applicant's spouse. The requirement that a spouse gives a letter of approval is part of the inquiry process. The investigator is required to meet with the spouse and record a statement from her. He said that he changed that practice and returned such files to the investigator to obtain a full statement from the spouse. Police Constable Brian goes on to say that he received information that certain named police officers were requesting money to fast-track applications, and he spoke to one of the civilians attached to the commissioner's office to have the matter investigated. He observed that when files were completed, they were returned to the vault and kept until those selected for approval would then go up to the commissioner. So there were concerns. PC Brian raised concerns. He had concerns about the movement of files from the vault. So when he was asked whether he had ever raised with the commissioner his concerns about movement of files from the vault, he said that they met on one occasion, but they didn't complete the meeting. And not too long after that, he was transferred from the division. So he had a meeting with the commissioner to raise concerns that he had about things that he was seeing happening inside the unit with the movement of files, right? So files moving. He have questions about how these files moving, who accessing the files, how they accessing the files, when the movement's taking place with the files. He had a meeting with the commissioner. He started to discuss his concerns. The meeting gets interrupted. The meeting doesn't finish. And not too long after that, he gets transferred to another section. And according to this police constable, approximately, and I'm reading verbatim from the report here, approximately 200 to 300 files were sent to the commissioner for approval on a weekly basis. I want to repeat that figure for you. Approximately 200 to 300 files were sent to the commissioner for approval on a weekly basis. So on a weekly basis, between 200 to 300 persons would have FULs approved and granted to them. So this police officer was in that unit for 7 weeks. Let me work some quick maths here, right? So if he was there for 7 weeks, 7 by 300, 7 3s are 21, right? That's 2,100. Or if we want, we could go with the figure of 200. So that is 7 2s are 14. So that is between 1,400 to 2,100 guns over that 7-week period, right? That is what this one officer here saw, right? And his analysis, the what he arrived at is approximately 200 to 300 files were sent to the commissioner for approval on a weekly basis. So let me go with the lower figure of 200. If it's 200 and on a weekly basis and it's 7 weeks that officer was there for, that is 1,400 FULs. I leave in only to work out 1,400 FULs by, was the lowest figure we heard here. The processing fee was 30,000. So work out 1,400 by 30,000 and tell me what figure I get now. Only work it out for me. Only know my maths is so hot. My maths is so hot. I still need to, I had to pull up calculator and things. So let me pull up my calculator and let me work it out. 1,400 multiplied by 30,000. What figure I get it? Only work it out. Declan Ross, what figure is that you get there? Let me scroll back up. Look the figure Declan Ross come up with there. That look like $52 million to me. That's the figure I just see there. Have I read that figure correctly? Have I read that figure correctly? Millions? All you understand in the numbers. And that's 7 weeks. That's 7 weeks, you know. That's 7 weeks. We ain't count from 2018 to August, September, October 2021. We ain't count the whole 3 years he was in office, you know. We only count 7 weeks. That's 7 weeks we count there, right? 7 weeks. So I return to the report. So this is, the firearms section was also plagued with a lot of traffic. Police officers not assigned to the section frequented the offices to inquire about the status of applications for third parties. He said that he put a stop to that activity and asked for CCTV cameras for this section. Thereafter, he heard talk that he was going to be transferred. Nobody told him anything, but he heard that he was interfering with people's business. PC Bryan was transferred out of the section after 7 weeks, right? So PC Bryan comes into the section, notes things are not happening the way they're meant to be happening, attempts to have a conversation with the commissioner about the things that he is seeing that is creating concerns for him. He takes note of the names of certain dealers who bring in applications, the rate at which applications being processed for them, the fact that their applications were receiving preferential treatment. He asks some questions. He requests that CCTV cameras be brought into the section because of the amount of traffic that taking place and people moving back and moving forth. And then he was told he was going to be transferred. He had talk that he's going to be transferred because he interfered in people's business. And then after 7 weeks of being in the unit, boom, out, transferred. So, I want to jump forward a little bit. So I'm going to read this bit here titled The Role of Ms. Vindra Dookie. So this is Justice Stanley John. A disturbing aspect of my investigation was the role of Ms. Vindra Dukey in relation to the grant of firearm licenses. She was a civilian employed on contract as a secretary to the TTPS for a period of 2 years at a salary of $10,332 per month. She functioned from the 6th floor of the administrative building. On Sunday, the 12th of September 2021, personnel from the Financial Investigation Branch executed a search warrant at Ms. Dukey's home and seized a substantial number of documents relating to firearm licenses. I want to remind all you what was going on the 12th of September 2021. By the 12th of September 2021, Griffith was back as the acting commissioner of police. Griffith had taken vacation. Well, he had said that he had taken vacation. We then found out after that he, well, nobody knows exactly what was going on because he didn't actually have a contract. And he was on, 1 minute he said he was on vacation, next minute he said that he was on no pay leave. But Griffith had left the country allegedly to go on a cruise. And then the next thing we hear that Vindra Dukey was being arrested, detained for questioning, and Griffith was trying to get back into the country. That's one of the things that had me cracking up that weekend. Because as soon as Ms. Dukey was held for questioning, the holiday came to a halt, a screeching halt, and homeboy was trying to get back into Trinidad. So, on Sunday, the 12th of September 2021, personnel from the Financial Investigation Branch executed a search warrant at Ms. Dukey's home and seized a substantial number of documents relating to firearms licenses. Again, let me remind you, this person works as a secretary within the administrative building of the TTPS. Yet, she is found to be in possession of documents that ought to be within the firearms permit section. So the documents that would have been found, so this is a summary of the documents found at her home. Booklets, as in people's FUL booklets, individual persons' FUL booklets, right? Photographs, correspondence from the Trinidad Rifle Association, application forms for FULs in favor of several persons, 19 applications for licenses in favor of several individuals, applications for variations under a named dealer, 2 provisional licenses for named persons, correspondence addressed to the commissioner from individuals. So Ms. Dukey declined an invitation for an interview, and as a result, on the 18th of October, Justice Stanley John forwarded the following email to the acting commissioner of police, and he said, "Dear Mr. Griffith, could you kindly respond to the following questions? Was the contract of Ms. Dukey amended in any way? At any time, did you assign her duties in the firearms section? Did you authorize her to remove documents relating to the issuance of FULs from the police admin building and the firearms section to her home? Prior to your departure on leave, can you advise the role to which Ms. Dukey was assigned?" So, we have a situation where, people like Nigel Clement deserve licks. She was taking work home to complete. She was being industrious. Nigel Clement, whose work was she taking home to complete? Because she not working in the firearms permit section. She working in police admin. According to all documents, she is one of the secretaries in police admin. So, what was she doing inside there? What was she doing in the firearms section? What was she doing with all of those files in her possession? And why is she the person who has a working database about all of the firearms permits, all of the FUL applications that have been processed by the commissioner? Not all of the FUL permits, not all of the FUL applications that have come into the TTPS, She is keeping track of all of the applications that have been approved by the commissioner. So this is where I've got to pause just for 2 seconds and tell you all about a conversation I had. So one day I was out buying personal female supplies. So I'm buying personal female supplies, and a gentleman comes up to me and he says, I have something interesting to tell you. And the gentleman proceeds to tell me the following. And I have to say it in a particular, I have to make sure that I cover my backside, right? The gentleman tells me that files come in. And files come in from specific dealers, from named dealers. And when the files come in from named dealers, initials are placed on the files so that they will know these files have come in from these dealers, right? So let's say Jarvis Mark and Javon Charles. I see all the name, that's why I call it all the name, right? Jarvis Mark and Javon Charles are dealers. When the files come in, you will see JC and JM on the files. I am then told that somebody who functions as a secretary goes into a section where they ought not to be going into because they have no right to be in that section, because they are working in that section. Them is a secretary for somewhere else. That person will come in, go through those files, take up those files, and then take those files back to the office that person working in and get the files processed and approved. Now, after the files get processed and approved, the files will then be taken back down to the permit section. And in the permit section, they will and then the dealers and they now will come, collect the files, they'll collect all of the approvals. And after they collect the approvals, then the processing fee gets paid. And that's why it is need to keep your record straight, because how else are you going to know how much processing fees supposed to be collected and how much and who had to get which cut, who had to get what percentage they have to collect off the processing fees. So that's why you make sure that you have your data processor who does go down and pick up whatever data, whatever files there are, and then make sure that they keep track of all of the things that they need to keep track of. So that way, when time comes to find out who have to get how much processing fee, you will work out who have to get how much processing fee. So I wanted to show you all this table, and this is a table that comes out of the report, right? Let me small up myself, you know how long me do this? All right. This table shows you how many guns would have been processed, how many FUL applications would have been processed prior to Griffith's tenure. So from the period 2008 to 2017, in a 9-year period, over the course of 9 years, and that would have been, most of that would have been under Stephen Williams's tenure, right? You have a total of 3,812 FULs having been processed under Williams's tenure. It wouldn't just be Williams, but it would have been Williams and at least one other. Oh my goodness, it's about 3 commissioners there. There would have been Gibbs, then Williams, and I've forgotten who would have been before Gibbs. Oh my goodness, might have been James Filbert, right? So 3 commissioners over 9 years would have approved 3,812 FULs. That's over 9 years, right? 3,812 FULs. In Gary's tenure, from August 28 to August 2021, 6,832 FULs, right? I also need to, so let me look at those figures again, slow it down and look at it again. 285 provisional permits given out, only 3 persons given dealer's license, and 3,812 FULs issued. Under Gary's tenure, 4,030 provisional permits, 7 persons allowed to become dealers, and 6,832 FULs in 3 years under Griffith. Now, me ain't gonna cast no aspersions here, right? I'm not going to talk about who make what and who make what. What I'm going to say is this. You sit down as a commissioner of police. You come into the office, and one of the first things you do is you move approval of FULs from under an assistant commissioner of police, and you put it under yourself, commissioner of police. And you claim, and it's also here in this report, that the reason you put it under yourself is to put an end to all of the backlog and to clear up the system and to make it so that it is an even playing field and is a straightforward process. It is an uncluttered process. There is no more corruption, and everybody could apply and see where things happening in the process. Then, according to this report, it have no proper processing of anything. The vault in a mess, files in a mess, civilians who ain't supposed to have access to files in vaults that they ought not to be in, dealers who not supposed to be submitting applications on behalf of individuals, submitting applications on behalf of individuals. And in the midst of all of that, you are having officers saying that they are being that they are aware that other officers charging processing fees. Gary. Right, Gary, I hope you write a nice long status about this particular live. I dying to hear how you going to make yourself the victim here. I am dying to hear how you are going to explain to the public in about 50,000 words that you are a victim and everybody trying to get you and everybody trying to smear your name. I guess much the same way with the 2 fellas who were sitting on chairs in police stations that somehow end up dead. We trying to get you again, right? You are again the victim, yeah? I tell all from the jump. This man was a hot, steaming mess and ought not to have been made commissioner of police. Right. So in here there are things about Christian Chandler, but his whole matter under investigation now, and I don't feel that I need to get into all of those details. There are, of course, other issues here about the kinds of guns that people were applying for and the number of guns that people were receiving. There's a person who got 20 FULs in 1 year, right? 20 guns in 1 year, 20 guns. And let me read that bit out for you. An FUL file contained 2 approval letters for a variation of the same FUL. One approval letter was signed by Griffith, and the other approval letter was signed by a senior division officer from the firearms unit, the same Constable David, right? So Griffith and Constable David was signing off on things at the same time for the same person. An applicant received 20 firearms in 1 year. 16 were issued during the term of Griffith and 4 were issued under Hackshaw. Now, I'll explain to me. If Gary see one person apply 16 times for variations, he wouldn't pause and say, well, something odd here, something wrong here. Why does one person need so many guns? Even though the law does not limit or restrict how many guns you could have, he paused to wonder about, well, was the need for all of these guns? Because we don't have a right to guns here, you know. Guns are not an enshrined right. Guns are something you can apply for, and the commissioner, at his discretion, can decide whether or not you're going to be given approval. But the way in which Griffith went about this entire firearms permission thing, it seems to me, based on what I was reading here, that he was allowing the business class to arm itself, to militarize itself in a sense, especially when you see the kinds of guns they were purchasing and the number, the volume in which they were bringing in those guns. And you pause and you're asking yourself, well, okay, all right, why is it that this particular group of persons need to have so many guns? Who attacking them? They at war, and I don't know that they're at war, because this is not a case of 1 or 2 pistols for personal protection or a shotgun to protect your home, you know. This is 16 and 20 and 25 guns. Warrior, what is going on there? And when you go through the document, you realize that is politicians, is the head of business chambers, is the head of some of the largest corporations and companies in this country, all sidling up to the commissioner of police to be able to get a piece of paper to bring in guns in this country. No wonder it bothered them so much that Griffith wasn't returned as commissioner of police. In any case, folks, it was lovely. It's nice to be back with you all. At first, I was going to be talking about I was going to talk about Faris and the Beauty Queen. I was going to be talking about, you know, the princess and paupers. That's what I was going to talk about this evening. I feel I will save that for Friday evening. So this season, we'll be doing lives twice for the week, Sunday evening, Friday evening. So I will see you all again on Friday evening. Thank you so much for showing up and keeping me company. And I look forward to seeing you all on